Hello everybody, my name is Philip Shepherd and I'm the Secretary General of IPRA. Welcome to this month's webinar. Today we're hearing from Stephen Dupont. Stephen is a professional communicator and a foresight strategist. He works as Vice President with the company Pocket Hercules and also does consulting privately for organizations and corporations. And he's talking to us today about precisely what he does. It's a presentation called Future Watch 2025 to 35, the trends that we as PR professionals should have on our radars. Stephen's going to talk for about half an hour, 40 minutes, and then take questions. If you have any questions, you can ask them anytime. There's a Q&A tab, which you'll see just a little column on the left of that chat screen. And you can put your questions there, and I will field them at the end and ask those of Stephen. So without further ado, I shall pass it over to him and disappear from your screens. So Stephen, over to you.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Philip, and thank you all for allowing me to speak with you today. I'm calling in from Minneapolis, Minnesota. I'm in the central part of the United States, and I look forward to sharing with you some thoughts and ideas about the future. I just want to first off say to you all, to reiterate what Philip said, I have been doing public relations and communications work for over 30 years. And I'm a foresight strategist too. And so I really understand where many of you are coming from. I've worked primarily in the agency side, but I've also worked for a division of General Motors, one of our largest corporations here in the US. And so I am here to talk to you about things I think you should be thinking about. I know it's budget season right now as we look into year 2025. And I just want to get you thinking about some things that you may want to consider in terms of your communications plan for the coming years. So let me start with this. You know, we've all been kind of, over the last few years, shocked by the disruption of the COVID pandemic. But the reality is, the future often happens drip by drip by drip. For example, EVs. The future of EVs is 136 years in the making. Did you know that the first battery-powered car was invented, commercially available, battery-powered car was invented in Germany in 1888. And in 1910, here in the United States, EVs accounted for like over 20% of automobile sales. What was the barrier? Why didn't we continue? Well, we found that we could produce combustion engines less expensively, and we had an infrastructure problem with charging our EVs. And of course, EV range, battery range was a problem then. And guess what? Those are still problems today. So, but it was all the technology that went into it, drip by drip by drip, that went into this future that we are realizing today. So what I want to tell you today, as a PR strategist, don't make the assumption from one year to the next that things will stay relatively the same. I need you as PR professionals to be scanning for change, looking for those signals. I especially am looking for the weak signals, the small changes today that might turn into monster changes someday in the future. And I want to take you to this little newspaper clip. It's a story about how coal consumption will affect climate, written back in 1912, right? So somebody back then, over almost 100 years, 110 years ago, was thinking about the future and thinking about the impact of what we're doing today and how it might change our tomorrow. A little bit about me, 30 years in PR. My current clients, I still do PR for clients, Rapala Fishing Lures, which is based in Finland. I have a client that supplies equipment to the mining industry. I have another client that is the largest manufacturer of lawnmowers and snowblowers here in North America. And I have another client that is the largest industrial crane rental company in the US. In fact, they are being affected right now by Hurricane Milton. They have a large operation down in Florida. In addition to doing PR and marketing communications, I also do foresight, and I try to incorporate the two in my practice. I'm the editor of Compass Magazine. I'm on the board of the Association of Professional Futurists, and also on the board of Teach the Future, in which we're trying to introduce futures thinking to kids in grades from ages 5 to 18. And here's our latest issue of Compass. It's going to be published next week, where we're going to be talking about the future of work and workplaces. This magazine I edit goes out to the futurist community around the world. Many of our articles feature futures thinking from all parts of our world. So my futures journey started back in 2006, 2007, when I worked in communications as one of the communications leads for GMAC Financial Services. It's the financial services division of General Motors. We did auto loans, home loans, all insurance, etc. And I was put on a special task force to think through scenarios about what would happen if a global bird flu pandemic would shut down everything in the United States for months. What would happen to our business? And that kind of got me started thinking more about the future and how it intersects with communications. So what I want to talk to you today is I want to share with you some big trends that I think you should be following. These are not all the trends. Remember, you're all coming from different industries, different organizations, nonprofits, corporations from all different parts of the world. There will be trends that will will be specific to you that I certainly couldn't have identified here. But I want to talk about some major things that I think will affect many of us. I also want to just give you some practical advice about how to start incorporating future thinking into your PR planning. Speaking of which, I know it's budget season. You're probably developing communications plans for the coming year. First and foremost, I want you to start thinking like a futurist. Start thinking not just the next year out, but thinking the next 5 to 10 years out, because every decision we make today will affect the future of our organizations or our clients tomorrow. So what is foresight? I just want to give you a quick definition. It's the process of anticipating systemic and transformational change. We use quantitative and qualitative tools and methods to think about alternative, plausible, and preferable futures. And we help leaders and organizations make smarter decisions today so they get to the desired future that they want at a later point. And I want to make clear, there is not one future. The future hasn't happened, right? There are many types of futures, from those that are very projectable. We can see them happening. We know for example, there's a presidential election here in the United States. There will be an outcome. We're not sure which one it will be, but there will be an outcome of that. So that's a projected one. And there's some very preposterous futures out there, some unimaginable things that we can't even think of yet today. Foresight is being used in organizations all over the world. Here's just a list of some of the organizations that are using them. Maybe some of you have foresight people on your staff right now. I encourage you to go see them, get to know them very well. But overall, throughout our world, many organizations are starting to incorporate foresight thinking and future thinking into their strategic planning. And I also want to make the note that you are already a futurist. You are already acting like a futurist. If you vote in your local elections, you are making a statement for a certain future that you want based on the party or the candidates that you're voting for. If you're investing in your retirement, you're anticipating a time when you may not be working and you want to live off savings. If you save for a child's college education, I know in many parts of the world, you have free college education. Here in the United States, we don't. So we save for that. If you create a bucket list or plans for the future, you are acting like a futurist. So thinking about the future is very natural. So how do we look for how do we look for the future? Okay, the future is a story. It is something that is in our head about what we think may happen, but we can see the signals for that today. And there's in the foresight community, we use this little formula called steeple that kind of help us categorize the changes. And I'm going to kind of go through some signals for you today about trends that relate to these signals. The thing is, you can start to look for these signals yourself. You can start to scan them. In fact, if you're in the communications business, you already are. You're constantly reading the news, I'm guessing, or watching it. You're looking for things that are changing, things that are interesting. Foresight people, go further. We're reading scholarly research. We're reading research papers. We're interviewing experts. We travel and we're looking for little changes. Several years ago, I was driving across the United States. It was on about a 2,000-mile drive with my wife, and I had to stop off for gasoline to fill up our car in the middle of Montana. And there, I couldn't believe it, was an EV charging station. And I was like, why is this EV charging station here in the middle of Montana? But that to me was a signal of change. Someone decided to invest and put that EV charging station there and is anticipating that there will be more EV cars and trucks coming down the road, at a later point. As you're scanning, I want you to think about impact. How does this impact your industry, your organization, your local community, your country? How does it impact you? So for example, I'm going to mention the war in Ukraine and Russia. How does that impact you and your organization? That's a significant change. Everything to me is connected. All the systems in our world are connected. They will affect us or impact us in one way or another. So I'm going to get into the trends now. I just have to say, I was just telling Philip, this is a really interesting time to live. There's a lot going on, and much of it can be overwhelming. There was a book that came out in the early 1970s called Future Shock, and I definitely would recommend reading it if you can get your hands on it. It was written by Alvin Toffler, and he talked about in the book being so overwhelmed with change that we can almost be paralyzed by it. And I feel like the next 10 years, we are going to be having a constant wave, one wave after another, of turbulence and disruption and change. And it's going to be hard to keep up with. Many futurists, myself included, believe that right now we are living through what we call a polycrisis. We have so many crises going on at one time. It's difficult to get our heads around. And from a practical standpoint, for organizations or nations, how do we anticipate these changes? How do we budget for these changes? Right now, we have Hurricane Milton going through Florida here in the United States. And there's a lot of talk about, is there enough money in our federal budget, in our state budget, to help for the recovery immediately after the storm is done, right? So how do we anticipate all these changes, and what do we do about them now to build a more resilient community, a more resilient nation afterward? So I'm going to start going through the changes. I'll try to get through as many of these as possible over the next 30 minutes, and then we'll be open for more questions from you. So here's some big social and cultural changes coming up, or are in the process of happening right now, signals of change. First off, over the next 25 years, over the next 50 years, we are going to see the rise of mega cities. More and more people are going to move to urban centers around our globe. In fact, this map from Statista is not as accurate as I would like it to be, because some of the major megacities will be in Africa itself. And more people are going to be moving there because, one, we're going to need land for agriculture. Many people can't find economic opportunities in rural areas. And there'll be some parts of our world that it will be difficult to live in because of global warming. And so people are going to be moving, and also moving because of sea level rise too, which I'll talk about later on. So this is going to be a big change for all of us across the globe. Depopulation in many countries, in the US, the EU, China, Japan, Korea, we are going through a depopulation event where our birth rates are not keeping up with those who exist today. And so we are going to have a situation in the future here where we're not going to have enough people to maybe operate the infrastructure that we need. So I'll give you an example. Here in Minnesota, we have lots of small towns where we have water, the people who operate our water systems in these plants, in these towns, they're getting old, and we're going to lose the knowledge uh, and of being able to transfer that knowledge to a younger generation, because those younger people, they don't want to stay in those smaller towns. So we're going to literally have small towns that die off because we don't have enough people. And so we're going to have to fill that gap with more pro-birth policies. And we're seeing some of that in different countries like Korea, where they are encouraging, providing more creating policies to encourage more births. Here in the United States, they're trying to do that, or the Republican Party is trying to encourage that. There's going to be the need for more immigration, and probably the use of robots, which I'll touch on too. So the Western world, we're going to have an aging population. Africa is actually going to see almost the exact opposite. Africa is going to be is getting younger. They have their population is growing. So there's lots of different things happening here with population that will have an impact on how our world is in the future. Speaking of which, we are going to have what I call a silver tsunami. Within 25 years, the number of people who are over 60 years old will double. So that means taking care of our elderly while finding people to replace the work that they did will become a major concern for many countries. Another big social change is the quest for equality for women. We have the 4B movement in Korea. We have protests in India and Iran. Here in the United States, conservatives in this current election cycle have a document out called Project 2025, which wants to limit women's rights to control their own bodies. At the same time, we're breaking barriers. We have Kamala Harris, who is our first Black Southeast Asian woman to run for president. Mexico first elected its first female president. So there is hope, there's change there, but this is still a big gap for literally half the world. We just got through one pandemic. Don't put away your pandemic crisis communications plans. Many epidemiologists believe that we are going to face another major pandemic in the coming 20 years. And we have old viruses like polio are starting to reemerge too as threats. So one thing to note about the COVID pandemic, all the experts saw that coming. Over 20 years before that, we had many minor pandemics, right? And we were able to defeat them. We were able to prevent them from spreading. But COVID overtook us, and we're going to probably have another such pandemic in the future. And it's not going to be helped unless we're able to deal with disinformation, which I'll talk about here in a little bit. There was a lot of hype several years ago about the metaverse, right? You as a communicator should still be thinking about the metaverse because it is slowly happening. I'm a cyclist. I love road biking. The metaverse, in a way, is happening. There's a worldwide software platform called Zwift that you can get on and you can ride in real time with your own avatar, and you can message other riders from all parts of the world while you're riding in these worlds that are created, worlds that have been created from nothing, and also worlds like I can ride through London and I can ride through Paris, right? So imagine this. I can go onto this world with my laptop computer or my big screen TV here, but imagine this world where I can use Apple glasses or Meta glasses or other virtual reality glasses, and where I can have a microphone and I can talk in real time. This meeting that we're having right now, I think is amazing in terms of the technology. But in 10 years from now, we could probably be all meeting in a virtual room together with our avatars. And my avatar could be presenting to you all in real time. That's going to happen. So the way we communicate through the internet is going to keep changing and evolving. Don't write off the metaverse yet. Moon fever. In the next 10 years, the US, China, and maybe some other countries are all planning on going back to the moon. And so there will be a lot of talk about what does it mean going back to the moon, and eventually what will it mean going to Mars and going to other places in our solar system. And so as a communicator, you should be prepared to talk about moon fever within your organization in the years to come. So let's talk about some technology changes. Access to digital technology, mobile phones, simple mobile phones right here, is spreading across the world. I think one of the greatest changes is happening in Africa, where you know, um, they're basically leapfrogging us, the rest of the world, in terms of technology, because they didn't have a robust landline telecommunication system like we did here in the US or in Europe. They're going right to digital technology. They have a younger generation that loves mobile phones. And so in this chart right here, you can see where mobile technology, 4G and 5G is spreading, and how it's connecting all of us. And the fact that I'm here to speak with you from Minnesota, and we have people here from Nigeria and Australia and France, we're all connected, is amazing. And that will enable us to build trust more in the future. I know that Philip mentioned that you had a speaker last month talking about AI, and foresight professionals are very concerned about AI. It will change everything. And I think the statement from the Brookings Institution, it's a think tank here in the United States, kind of more liberal leaning, says it all. Whoever leads in artificial intelligence in 2030 could rule the world in 2100. AI and artificial general intelligence, is steadily advancing. ChatGPT-5 will be introduced later this fall. What all of us are really worried about, or concerned about, I should say, is when the AI starts teaching the AI. So I would encourage you all, do not be left behind. Learn everything you can about AI, learn how to incorporate it into your communications, and be aware, especially for those of you who are Gen Z or millennials, when you get to become, when you've had 30, 40 years experience in the communications business, those alpha gens, they're the 14-year-olds today, will be the AI natives of tomorrow. Speaking of which, AI and robotics are going to merge over time. And so, I grew up in a time of Star Wars and watching CP3O and R2D2, right? Well, they are coming. They are going to be our reality. And Boston Dynamics out of Boston, Massachusetts, is developing robots here in this upper corner that can hang sheetrock, can build homes. We're going to have robots in our libraries. We already do in some parts of the United States. We're going to have, I went to a Chinese restaurant the other day. We had a little robot bringing the food up to our table. We're going to have robots that comfort us in our hospitals. And that's just the beginning. Long term, way down the road, but the futurists are talking about this now. What happens when the AI robots start to say, hey, I'm doing all this work. I should be paid for it. I'm contributing to society. I should be able to vote. I have feelings. Can I marry a human? Can I marry another android? So there's lots of implications down the road that many of us are thinking about for robots and AI. Apple just introduced earlier this year its new version of VR glasses, and Meta is coming out with its new version, Meta Facebook. So we are entering a whole new world of what we call spatial computing, where we are going to be learning and, in fact, maybe presenting with our glasses. And so this is a future that is coming as these glasses get cheaper, they get more comfortable, they get lighter to wear. We're going to be using them more and more often. And one of the best opportunities for this technology will be in training. Here's an example of somebody learning to train, like doing surgery, for example, with AI, or using these VR glasses from an educational standpoint. Imagine a student today walking through Rome in the year 1000, right? What that will change how we view the world, how we view each other, and how you communicate too. Another thing that's going to happen over the next 10 years, the technology is coming where we will have implantable chips. We already have companies that are implanting chips for security reasons in a person's hand. You could, go up to a building and you wave your hand, it lets you into a building. We have implantable chips in animals. We've had that for a long, long time to track those animals. There was a proposal in Canada at one point to implant chips into babies so we can always track them, for their security. But the future is going to be implantable chips that allow maybe the blind to see, the deaf to hear, the paralyzed to walk, or allow any of us to communicate in any language anywhere in the world. Company owned by Elon Musk, Neuralink, is doing that kind of technology, and there are others too that are doing this. I also think that we're going to see a combination over the next 10 years between semiconductor chips and human brain cells that create kind of more of an organic, I don't know how to describe this, organic computing experience. Communications. So I've actually been talking about this for 20 years. My first presentation about media fragmentation I gave back in 2020 at the PRSA National Convention here in the United States. The media is going to continue to fragment. Traditional media is being overwhelmed by non-traditional media. There's a growing reliance on getting our news through social media and YouTube. I don't know where you are, if you're seeing the same thing, but here in the United States and North America, YouTube is the most watched platform for news and entertainment now versus our network television services. Human news anchors are going to be replaced with AI. Content creators are going to continue to grow. I was just watching a TikTok creator from Singapore who's gained a lot of popularity for just doing a video, series of videos where she's using Google Earth to zoom in to different parts of the world and say if they're ugly or not ugly. She's got millions of followers. We're going to have People watch the news and entertainment with VR glasses. Social media will continue to fragment. We're having more and more social media in the years to come. The big players will fragment as people get sick of all the advertising on them. We're going to have enclosed social networks where you have to be invited in. And we're going to have more polarization too. And there's going to be security concerns. When we put out news, how do we know it's real? And so there's going to be more steps to authenticate the news and information that we put out in the future. Also, we are becoming a video culture. And so every piece of news we put out is going to have to be translated into video over time. Here's an example. Some of you may know we have a presidential election going on here in the United States. Kamala Harris, the Democratic candidate, she is getting a lot of criticism for appearing on a podcast the other day called Call Her Daddy, which reaches millions of women, younger women, ages 35 and under, who millions who watch this podcast every week, right? And so here's an example where the mainstream media is not happy. It's criticizing this presidential candidate for going on a podcast that is actually more relevant and has more impressions than some traditional media programs. And I'm sure in where you are at, you are going to see the same thing where you have podcasts and other video platforms that are challenging traditional media, whether it's print, radio, or TV, for eyeballs. We live in an attention economy, where getting attention and keeping it is what is most important to the products we're selling or the candidates. Need an AI spokesperson? This is going to happen. The technology is coming where we can create realistic AI-generated spokespersons or TV news anchors or other AI that could replace actors. So the technology is coming where we may not be able to distinguish from a real person delivering information versus an AI person. In the years to come, I could create this entire presentation and have an AI deliver it to you, right? So that is coming. Fake news and conspiracies are only going to grow. It is running rampant here in the United States. I think it's a big problem in the EU too, and it's going to just become more and more of a problem globally. That's because we have some bad actors out there that are fueling it. It's a big problem here in our US presidential election right now, and it's a big problem in the hurricane relief efforts going on for Hurricane Helene and Hurricane Milton, which is going through Florida right now, this very instant. And so we have leaders in our country who are fueling fake news and conspiracies, and it's only going to become more problematic in the years to come. Politics. So our US election, unfortunately, affects everybody. And it will have whoever is elected, both at president, but also our elected leaders in our legislature, will affect the outcome of the Ukraine-Russia war and the wars going on in the Middle East right now. It will affect climate change. It will affect the alliance with NATO. It will affect alliances with other countries. It will affect how the United States interacts with China. So it's a very pivotal fork in the road moment. It is, if you believe the polls, a kind of still 50-50 race. And so it's something that everybody is watching very carefully. Many of the futurists I know are on pins and needles waiting to find out what will happen, because the way both of our political parties are going to approach the world in the future are so different. And so the thing I'm watching for in this election is a participation of young voters and first-time voters, the Gen Zers. And also, we have in 11 of our states voting on reproductive rights. And that's also a big factor in our country. Yes, in our country, we're still debating what's happening with the issue of abortion. So that's going to have a big impact on our election. And so we're all waiting we just wish it would be all over with, frankly. And maybe you do too, wherever you are at. So I want you to imagine the year 2035. In the US, we change our leaders regularly through our election system, right? But in other parts, you may have leaders who stay on for a long, long time. So I want you to project 10 years out. All of the leaders here are 70 years or older. And as we just saw with our US President, Joe Biden, who is 81, aging can have an influence on how you are perceived and also, what you can get done. And so imagine in the next 10 years whether these leaders are going to be in or out and what the ramifications would be uh, if they're not there anymore. We are increasingly living in a bipolar world. We have two global systems that are competing. It's not the traditional Cold War, US versus Russia. It is now groups of countries. We have the United States, the EU, Australia, Japan, Korea, the G7, the G20 on one side, and we have BRICS on another. The BRICS Economic Alliance is Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, UAE, and others. And it's an economic as well as a military and industrialization. We have two competing systems happening at the same time. And so it's going to lead to friction and tension. And one of those things that's happening, for example, is because we lack trust. I kind of believe that trust is the new oil. We have lack trust. We are going to have more industrialization happening in our own countries. We're going to take back the progress we've made in globalization. So in the United States, if we can't trust China, we're going to take back more of that manufacturing. We're going to bring more of the semiconductor chip manufacturing back to the US. We're going to bring back the pharmaceutical manufacturing. And it doesn't help when countries threaten, for example, China threatening an invasion of Taiwan in terms of building trust. And so that is what is going to be happening. I know there are calls in the EU. Macron just the other day said, we need to be more self-sufficient. I think that you're going to see, for example, when it comes to energy, a decoupling between the EU and Russia in years to come. So it's all interrelated. And we also keep in mind that India is on a path to becoming a superpower in the next 20 years too. We're a world at war. It's not quite World War III, but it's pretty darn close. And so the Ukraine-Russia war, it's a no-win situation, basically. It's just, Russia is decimating its future. Its young people are leaving. Its young people don't want to go fight in that war. There's going to be the area that they're fighting for. They won't be able to reclaim that for years because of all the landmines and the other armaments there. It's just being torn up. So there's that. We have what's happening in the Middle East. We have China threatening to invade Taiwan. We have calls for conscription in the EU. We are, for all practical purposes, a world at war. And in the process, we're redefining war. The war machine is changing. Drone war is happening, is changing. We're seeing maybe the collapse of the world's second mightiest military. Russia, was it ever the world's second toughest military? We're seeing the threat of nuclear weapons again, or blowing up nuclear power plants, same thing. We're seeing winter war. We're seeing, hey, with Russia threatening to cut off fuel lines to Europe. We're seeing cyber warfare. We just had a water power plant here in the United States just the other day. It had a cyber attack, right? We're seeing economic war. China is helping to build all parts of the world. A lot of economic IOUs are happening. We will see space war happen in the future, where satellites might get shot out of the sky. We might see androids fighting one day. Robotic dogs are being used in both police work and in warfare. So things are being redefined and changed, and technology is impacting that. Imagine, for example, the first missile strike on a communication satellite orbiting Earth. Imagine a internet cable, in fact, the one that maybe connects us right now, being cut. Imagine, for example, a massive cyber attack on your country or on your organization or your local utilities. That is what you should put in your crisis communications plan. That is a very realistic scenario. Let's talk about the environment quickly here. We are going to see more and more horrific hurricanes, cyclones, and typhoons in the future. We are going to be seeing category 6. In fact, some say with Hurricane Dorian that happened a couple of years ago, we already did. So the superstorms are getting worse. This is from the New York Times yesterday. These superstorms are no longer outliers. They're no longer freaks of nature. They are happening more and more often, and they are becoming regular occurrences. We in the United States have had multiple 1,000 years rainfall events where more than 30 inches of rain have fallen within 24 hours. That is becoming normal. We need to prepare for that. We need to be more resilient to this by thinking about what we can do today we can't prevent this. It's already out the box. It's going to happen. But what can we do to adapt and bounce back from these catastrophes? So, related to all this climate change, we have many cities around the world, London even, I couldn't believe this, that are going to face water shortages in the years to come. We're going to also have too much water in some places. We're going to have devastating flooding in Southeast Asia, Pakistan, for example, Bangladesh, for example. In all coastal areas will be affected, right? And so we're going to have people who are going to need to move. What I say, if you don't believe this, follow the money. Watch what the insurance companies are doing. In parts of the United States, the insurance companies are saying, we're not going to insure some parts of our country anymore because of these damaging storms and rainfall events. We are also going to be having more excess heat events where it gets simply too hot to work outside. We are going to have to change our policies about how we have people work outside. And the biggest concerns right now are in India and China, where they lack air conditioning. In fact, that is one of the fastest growing markets. If I were investing today, I'd be investing in air conditioning manufacturers who are selling to India and China. That is a big concern there. Some scientists are very worried about a massive wet bulb effect, where there's so much heat and so much excessive humidity that people literally just cannot live. They just die because they don't have access to cooler temperatures. Here are the nations at biggest risk right here. You can see this on this map from German Watch, and you can see everybody is affected. Everybody. And so we are going to have climate migration. It is coming. This is a city 2 hours north of where I live called Duluth, Minnesota. It's on the shores of Lake Superior, one of the largest freshwater lakes in the world. And there are forecasts that maybe as many as 1.2 billion people will need to move because of rising sea levels and other climate change, like excessive heat, to cooler places where there's more fresh water. And Duluth, by the way, is considered one of the #1 destinations in North America for people to move. Warmer weather, a warmer world is also going to affect the cold places and our snow. The Arctic Circle is going to melt and it will become of strategic importance. Natural resources under Greenland's ice cap. Companies are already lining up to mine there for all the precious metals there. Ski season, if you love skiing, you see this, I love skiing. Our ski seasons are going to become shorter and shorter. What we don't realize as a skier is snowpack is our water, is our fresh water in many of these communities where the mountains are. And so if we have less snowpack over time, we're going to have drought situations. So final section here is economics, and then we'll go to questions. With AI, we are going to have, in all the data that we are creating, we are going to have an unquenchable thirst for energy. We need to feed the AI and the EV. And so data centers are going to need more and more energy. What have they done here in the United States? All of our federal land, they're opening up 31 million acres in 11 states to build solar power plants. Solar power plants will enable places in like Africa, for example, and many other parts of the world to generate to have electrical energy for additional economic development. So we are going to need to build the energy. And so we're going to have a massive energy transition over the next 20 years. Solar power, wind power, industrial battery scale battery storage units. The race is on for fusion power. And imagine fusion power delivering unlimited energy. In the meantime, we're going to see more and more companies returning back to nuclear power, which is fission power. At the same time, we're also going to see breakups of how we deliver energy. I really think that the Ukraine-Russia war has taught the EU, maybe we can't rely on Russian energy anymore. We have to figure out how to get it from other places or how to do it on our own. Supply chains are going to be disrupted because of climate change, because of war, because of many other factors. And so in your crisis communications, you need to think about supply chain disruptions in the years ahead. This race is on for minerals all over the world to feed our EVs, our cell phones, the AI. We're going to need rare minerals, lithium, and other types of minerals, and it's going to lead to more conflict around the world. Economic recessions do happen. The last one we had was with COVID in 2020. The last one before that happened about 10 years before. They do happen. There is a pattern of global recessions over time. And so in the next 10 years, just be aware, it's likely we will have a recession of one sort or another, or you will have a recession in your region where you are at. And this is my last slide in this section, the space race. The space race is on. This is really looking out at the future. I just mentioned mining. Well, there are companies and nations here that want to get their hands on some asteroids. There's one particular asteroid that they say is worth $11 trillion because of the precious metals on it. If we could bring that back to Earth, that would be incredible. So how do we do that? Well, that's what they're trying to figure out. But in the meantime, we're going to try to get back to the moon, trying to figure out how to go to Earth, to Mars. We're trying to figure out what we're going to do about all the space junk in our atmosphere. There's a lot going on here, and it will have lots of economic ripple effects in the years to come. So what do you do with all this? Start preparing for the future. Your actions count. You can make a difference. as PR professionals, we need to stand up for truth and to build trust. That is what we do. And so that is at the core message of all of this. I want you to develop a futurist mindset. I want you to ask more what if and so what questions. Have conversations with your colleagues about the future, about potential disruptions. Invite experts like me, if you would like, or other foresight professionals into those conversations to think about the unimaginable. Develop your crisis communications. That's the lesson I learned out of my foresight or my experience at General Motors years ago. Who would ever thought we'd be dealing with a bird flu or a great recession? You can anticipate these things and be better prepared for them. So, like I said, there are many futures ahead. You can choose to let the future happen to you, or you can choose the future you want. I want you to be bold, be clear, be transparent, and claim your future. And if you'd like to connect with me, great. And I'm ready to answer any questions, Philip. And in the meantime, if you guys like this presentation, scan this code and let me know. And I'm ready to answer any questions you may have.
Stephen, thank you very much for that presentation, which I think was the very definition of thought-provoking. You probably scared more people than you comforted, but
No, I don't mean to, but I mean, there are some realistic things we have to think about.
absolutely. No, it was very, very good. I've got a few questions, and I'd like to start with the one that's about communication, because of course that is our essence. Is undetectable disinformation a primary threat, do you think, to all of these things we've been talking about? It strikes me, it's striking us in the PR world that it's something that we're dealing with more and more than we didn't have to deal with, and technology is making it undetectable.
I would just say in general, yes. I mean, that is probably the problem with all of the technology. There's just so much going on. It's hard to keep your to get wrap your brain around it all, right? It's hard to trace it, to track it. And so I think as communications professionals, we have to just simply do our best job to build trust throughout our organizations, build trust with the media, but also we have to keep our, read the signals of change, watch for those undetectable signals there. That especially in terms of miscommunication, conspiracies, keep on top of it, and I think what President Biden did the other day was incredible. He went and did a national press event from the White House saying it's ridiculous, it's stupid for Americans to believe all of the conspiracy theories are going on around the hurricanes right now. He called it out, and so I think that we're going to need to do more of that ourselves.
Yeah, I agree. You also mentioned depopulation as being a potential threat because of the lack of people there to care for aging population, etc. But I also wonder, is it perhaps in the longer term a good thing with a planet of diminishing resource?
Well, that's a great question because I mean, I remember even since I was a kid, our planet's population is growing too fast. We're going to use up all the resources. But we also have to remember that we've built infrastructure that is being run by humans, right? And if we don't have the humans to run the infrastructure, it's going to fail. So we are going to have to figure out the gap there. And in the United States, we have one political party that's saying we don't want any immigrants. In fact, let's ship back all the immigrants we have back, right? So we need immigrants in the United States to run and do some of the things that need to be done here if our population is not going to increase. Or we are going to have more automation, androids, AI take care of that gap too. But there's a certain amount of infrastructure that's happening right now that just simply needs humans to run it.
Yeah. So on that very theme, we have a question from Zana, who's PR manager at Smart Vision.
Yeah.
Do you believe that AI will replace many jobs, and what's that impact going to be on society when people are now without jobs?
Well, this is a fundamental question that everybody in the foresight community is talking about. In fact, in our next issue of Compass, many of the articles are devoted to that very question. Um, so what I'm hearing, what I'm kind of comprehending in terms of AI and its effect on the workplace is, yes, it is going to replace jobs, but there will be new jobs that will be created from it too. Um, do we know if that will balance out? Don't know. Um, there will be current jobs that we're doing that will be in which the work will be done more efficiently, more effectively, there'll be more productivity supposedly out of that. But to address your question, yes, if people can't find work because the AI has replaced them, yes, there are some countries, some communities, we have some communities here in the United States that are dealing or experimenting with universal basic income as a means of helping people out. So if the AI can create all this value, then here's the question. If AI can create all this value, should some of that value be shared with humans because they don't need to work as much? And I think the funny thing about all of this is, as I was growing up as a kid, every article about the future talked about the future of the 4-day work week, about how we'd work less, right? And here we are. We're at that point where we could possibly do that. And we're starting to find out, oh, wait a minute, maybe I do want to work.
Yeah, exactly. We have a question from Volker, which I think I might refer away, because he's asking what impact AI will have on crisis communications. So I think it sounds like Volker was not with us last month when we had a whole webinar, which was precisely on that question. Volker, if you go to our website, you can click on that presentation and have your question answered in concise detail. That will take about another 40 minutes to go through. One more question, more perhaps about process in terms of what you do and what others do.
Yeah.
In the past, corporations like Shell used to do a thing called scenario planning,
Yep.
where they would look at a number of scenarios, and out of that would emerge perhaps 2 or 3, which got worked through into more detail, and upon which the company based its decisions. Does that sort of thing still happen, or is it now multiple scenarios and much more detail perhaps than we had in the past?
Oh, no, it absolutely still happens. And yes, in fact, here's related to your last question. AI, some futurists now use AI to help develop those scenarios. But the basic point about the use of foresight in terms of strategic communications is we're trying to look ahead to help us make smarter decisions today, right? And what we're trying to do with all of this is we're trying to understand all the different possible alternative futures that are out there, and what is the best future, the highest quality future that we want, and what decisions do we need to make now and in the years to come to get to that. And so absolutely, we still use scenario planning because, like I said very early in my presentation, the future is literally a vision in our head. It's a story in our head. It's what we want it to become. And so to help that reality become realized, we need to start making the little decisions, the drip by drip by drip decisions today to get us there.
Lovely. And probably just time for one last question, which comes from Omadia Ibetan. And he's thanking us for the presentation and asking about media relations being a central part of PR. What sort of disruption do you think is going to be most important in media?
Well, I like to say to you all, I began my career in PR as strictly a media relations person. I eventually became a partner and led the media relations group for a firm called Carmichael Lynch Relate. And so that was my bread and butter in terms of doing PR, media strategy. Um, I think that, as I alluded to on that slide earlier, that the media is just going to continue to fragment, and you're going to see new media opportunities emerge. I find it really hard nowadays when I do media actually to find reporters, because so many at least I'll speak from the US perspective. Thousands of reporters have been laid off from their jobs in the last 10 years. And what in another presentation I would give that's more US focused, we have what we call news deserts. So we have the, the, the small town newspaper used to be the foundation for small towns all across our country, neighborhood newspapers, right? Where people could share their local news. You'd read about the local, sporting events. You'd read about your neighbors. You'd read about the news from the local city council, right? Those have all gone away. And so I think that, and those used to be the kind of the breeding grounds for the young journalists. They start there and they grow up into larger and larger media. That's all gone away. That whole infrastructure, that landscape has all gone away. And I think that that's going to keep evolving and changing. But I think you're going to see, a media emerging on the social media, on YouTube, replacing that.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. Stephen, our time is up. Thank you very much indeed for excellent presentation. As ever, it's been recorded and will be up on our website next week, and be there for about a year or so if anyone want to look at it and download it. And as you can see, Stephen has invited direct contact if you would like that. Our webinar next month is on the 14th of November, so I hope some of you can join us also for that. And in the meantime, Stephen, once more, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for the opportunity, everybody. It's so good to be with you, and have a great day.